So we have some colossal news in the world of media. So you guys know that recently Don Lemon was fired from CNN, and you have Tucker who was fired from Fox News. These are colossal shifts, but it goes a lot deeper than that too. So BuzzFeed News recently, Dunzo, they were a staple of 2010s media. 538 recently axed Nate Silver. 538 was Nate Silver's baby. Without him, it's not really 538 anymore. Gawker Gonzo, you guys know that. So all these 2010s era media giants, these behemoths, are now done. Well, this is perhaps, in my opinion, the biggest of them all, biting the dust. So the New York Times says, Vice is said to be headed for bankruptcy. The company, which was once valued at $5.7 billion, has been struggling to find a buyer this year. Wow. Vice. Now, if you don't know enough about it or whatever, don't worry. I'm going to explain it all to you in just a minute. First, let's see what they say in this article here. Vice, the brash digital media disruptor that charmed giants like Disney and Fox into investing before a stunning crash landing, is preparing to file for bankruptcy, according to two people with knowledge of its operations. The filing could come in the coming weeks, according to three people familiar with the matter who weren't authorized to discuss the potential bankruptcy on the record. The company has been looking for a buyer and still might find one to avoid declaring bankruptcy. More than 5 companies have expressed interest in acquiring Vice, according to a person briefed on the discussions. The chances of that, however, are growing increasingly slim, said one of the people with the knowledge of the potential bankruptcy. A bankruptcy filing would be a bleak coda to the tumultuous story of Vice, a new media interloper that sought to supplant the media establishment before persuading it to invest hundreds of millions of dollars. Let me pause there. You're already seeing what the main problem here was. The main problem was they were the outsiders. They were the anti-establishment, independent media people. And then they decided, let's actually sell out to establishment media. And from then on out, it was just a slow decline into irrelevance. In 2017, after a funding round from private equity firm TPG, Vice was worth $5.7 billion. But today, by most accounts, it's worth a tiny fraction of that. In the event of a bankruptcy, Vice's largest debt holder, Fortress Investment Group, could end up controlling the company, said one of people. Okay, it's a weird sentence. Vice would continue operating normally and run an auction to sell the company over a 45-day period, with Fortress in pole position as the most likely acquirer. Unlike Vice's other investors, which have included Disney and Fox, Fortress holds senior debt, which means it gets paid out first in the event of a sale. Disney and Fox, which have already written down their investments, are not getting a return, the person said. Vice Media Group has been engaged in comprehensive evaluation of strategic alternatives and planning, Vice said in a statement. The company, its board, and stakeholders continue to be focused on finding the best path for the company. Vice began as a punk magazine in Montreal more than 2 decades ago. Over the years, it blossomed into a global media company with a movie studio, an ad agency, a glossy show on HBO, and bureaus in far-flung world capitals. Disney, after investing hundreds of millions in Vice, explored buying the company in 2015 for more than $3 billion, according to the two people familiar with the conversation. So this is Shane Smith, who's one of the masterminds of it. Believe it or not, Gavin McGinnis, the now far-right weirdo, was actually instrumental in the original launching of Vice. And again, I think the biggest issue here is Vice started out as we're the new media people, we're the independent media people, we're anti-establishment, we're the outsiders. And they did really good work. And then eventually Shane Smith decided, let me cash in, let me get out while I'm ahead. And he did exactly that. And then, look, the lesson here is you cannot turn over a company that's doing well, a company with a vision, to people who don't have a vision, to people who aren't true to the original mission. You can't just take a giant infusion of cash and get 17 voices in the room saying, I think we should do this, I think we should do this. You have to have a grand vision, you have to stick to that vision come hell or high water, and you have to keep everything close to the chest. The second it became more like a standard business is when they were doomed. It was just a slow decline from then on. So for those of you who might be too young and might not remember the powerhouse that Vice was, this is what Vice was known for, man. Vice would, like, you have CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, all these traditional media outlets, and they really stopped doing investigative reporting. They really stopped doing, like, hard-hitting, on-the-ground, really interesting stuff. And so Vice decided, what if we only did that? What if we decided, I'm going to take a crew of 3 people with a GoPro or some camera or whatever, right? And let's go do a ride-along with ISIS. What? You're going to do a ride-along with ISIS or Al-Qaeda? Or you're going to, go embed yourself with a dictator who's on the verge of being couped? Or you're going to go right smack dab in the middle of a of a raging civil war, or you're going to go right smack dab in the middle of, a crack den with junkies all over the place to report on an overdose epidemic. Like, they would actually say, let's take cameras into places that are terrifying, where nobody wants to go, but people will be interested in learning about what's going on. That's what they would do. And so here, I'm just going to give you one example here. This is one of multiple times they were embedded with ISIS and like engaged in the fighting on the ground, whether it be in Syria or Iraq or elsewhere. This one happens to be in Syria. But this is what Vice was known for. Here, I'll read it for you. Where's the lighter? I just need a lighter.
This is the heart of Aleppo, one of the world's oldest cities, now a wasteland of war. Since the war reached Aleppo 2 years ago, Syria's industrial and commercial capital has been the scene of bitter house-to-house fighting, as both the rebels and the regime struggle for overall control. Vice News spent 2 weeks with rebel fighters from the Islamic Front coalition as they struggle to hold their positions. While the Islamic Front rebels have placed government-held West Aleppo under siege, their stronghold in Aleppo's ancient Old City has come under threat from a regime push to cut off their supply line to Turkey in the north. Now the Islamic State, the most powerful single force in Syria, is the real threat, advancing towards Aleppo from the east.
I think go in the building.
Okay, so this one here, they said they're with the Islamic Front, and actually ISIS is encroaching on them. So this one isn't when they're embedded with ISIS, but there's like 5 or 6 different videos where they're embedded with ISIS. They do a ride-along one time with the people who are enforcing Sharia in a newly overtaken city. I believe it was in Iraq. Insane, amazing. In this case, they're talking about the Syrian civil war. You, of course, had the Assad troops, who are mostly Shia, but that's actually a mix of various different people. And you had many of the rebels who were outwardly sort of jihadist, whether it be Al-Nusra Front, which is a branch of, I believe ISIS, maybe Al-Qaeda. It might be Al-Qaeda. And then you have the FSA, the Free Syrian Army, which was generally viewed as the more moderate rebels who the U.S. was giving funding and arms to. And they were in smack dab in the middle of this raging civil war. Now, by the way, of course, we know how this wound up. The Assad government ended up holding on to power, but the battles were fierce and vicious at this point in time. And you have these reporters on the ground embedded with like rebel troops, and it is just putting their life on the line. I'll give you another example of one of their best documentaries they ever did. This one is titled "The Cannibal Generals of Liberia." So Shane Smith himself, this is what he used to do back in the day. This is from 11 years ago, bro. 18 million views on YouTube. He did the work here. He went on the ground to Liberia, and he explains like exactly what's happening there, exactly what these generals are guilty of. This is astonishing. Now, in this case, this guy, General Butt Naked, he calls himself actually fought butt naked. He was a literal cannibal who would eat the hearts of his enemies. And again, he just met him casually and spent a couple days with him. This is crazy.
In this episode, we go to Liberia and hang out with cannibal warlords. I was afraid probably the whole time.
The following content has been identified by the YouTube community as inappropriate or offensive to some audiences. And you have to like click through these disclaimers every time you watch one of their videos. Just to give you, we don't need to continue watching this. You guys can check it out if you want to. The Cannibal Generals of Liberia. But I'm just reading from the recommended portion here, all Vice stuff. Monkey meat and the Ebola outbreak in Liberia. Again, on the ground in Liberia. Gangs of El Salvador. Embedding themselves with the gangs of El Salvador. The brutal fight that's left the Central African Republic in, I think probably says shambles. Christians in the Caliphate, the Islamic State. Inside a gang initiation with the silent murder Crips. Suicide Forest in Japan. Full documentary. These are all Vice pieces. All of them phenomenally successful, amazing views. This is what made them big. And then again, Shane Smith left. They did some business moves. He cashed out. They sort of lost the overall vision. And they kind of became noise in the background. They just became noise in the background. You have too many voices in the room, too many different visions, and now they're going belly up. It is crazy to think of that because they had the most potential of any of the 2010s media companies, in my opinion, because this is real stuff. This is real work. This is actually interesting. This is on the ground. It's dangerous. And they had so much potential, and they just blew it. And it really is a shame to see. I hope somebody eventually goes back to the original Vice formula and sticks with it. And I'll say this, man, I think this is probably the most important point. If somebody were to do that, don't get too big for your britches. Don't expand too much. Don't get traditional business interests involved. Don't get financing from various investment firms. Like, keep it close to the chest. Run a tight ship. And then I think they would have been successful if they still went down that path. But as you can see here, look like all these documentaries 8 years ago, 10 years ago, 7 years ago, 3 years ago, 8 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Like, at some point, they lost the mission. So a giant falls, and I think it's official now. The 2010s era of media is totally over. You have Vice gone, Gawker gone, BuzzFeed News gone, 538. Whoo! And so we'll see what comes next. But hey, we're still hanging on. 2012 is when we came around. We're still hanging on. Very proud of that fact. But it's a vicious landscape out there. That much is clear. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.